The unfinished spot. The late afternoon sun, a fiery orb sinking towards the horizon, cast long, dancing shadows across the manicured lawn. The rhythmic whir of the clippers had ceased, leaving an abrupt silence in its wake. Elias, his brow furrowed with concentration lines etched deeper by the day's heat, wiped a sleeve across his forehead, pushing back strands of gray-flecked hair. He surveyed his handiwork along the curving flagstone path, a faint sense of satisfaction warming him despite the lingering sweat. Every rose bush trimmed, every edge neat, the hydrangeas bursting with new, vibrant blooms. "You do good work," Sarah's voice floated across the expanse of emerald green, a playful lilt in its tone. He looked up, his eyes, the color of worn denim, finding her perched on the porch railing, her arms draped casually over the wood. She had just turned 18, and the shift in her presence was palpable, a vibrant energy that hummed just beneath the surface. "But maybe you missed a spot." Elias squinted, scanning the immaculately kept garden again. "Missed a spot?" he repeated, genuinely puzzled. He prided himself on his thoroughness. Sarah pushed off the railing, taking a slow step down the porch steps, her gaze holding his. "I wasn't talking about the yard." Her voice softened, dropping to a near whisper, yet it cut through the still air with surprising clarity. The playful grin on her face had faded, replaced by something more knowing, a subtle invitation. The summer air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming petunias, suddenly felt heavier, pressing in around them. The space between them, no longer just a stretch of lawn, throbbed with an unexpected, almost tangible tension. Elias felt a peculiar flutter in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. He cleared his throat, his gaze dropping to his well-worn work boots. "Well, I should be heading out," he mumbled, reaching for his equipment bag. The words felt clumsy, inadequate. "Already?" Her voice was closer now, and when he looked up, she was standing just a few feet away, her eyes, the startling blue of a clear summer sky, fixed on his. "It's still early." He gestured vaguely towards the setting sun. "Got a long drive." The lie felt hollow even to him. His drive was barely 15 minutes. Sarah's lips curved into a soft, alluring smile. "A shame. I was hoping to hear more about your day. Or maybe tell you about mine." She took another step, closing the distance further. The faint scent of something sweet, like honeysuckle and youth, drifted towards him. Elias's grip tightened on the handle of his clippers. This was uncharted territory, a path he hadn't considered in decades. Sarah, his client's daughter, practically a child he'd watched grow up. Yet, the woman standing before him now was anything but. The playful innocence had been shed, replaced by a confident allure that was both disarming and exhilarating. He could feel the blood thrumming in his ears. He finally met her gaze, a silent battle playing out between caution and a sudden, undeniable spark of interest. "My day was uneventful," he managed, his voice a little rougher than he intended. "Mine wasn't," she countered, her smile widening. "And I think you know why." She held his gaze for a beat longer, a silent challenge, then turned with a graceful swivel, walking back towards the porch. "Don't rush off, Elias. There's always time for the unfinished spots." Her words hung in the air, a tantalizing invitation that left him standing amidst the scent of roses and freshly cut grass, his heart thrumming an unfamiliar rhythm. He watched her disappear inside, the screen door clicking shut, leaving him alone with the deepening shadows and a dizzying sense of possibility. Lemonade and lingering looks. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet perfume of honeysuckle, a familiar summer evening aroma. The landscaper, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun, paused, the rhythmic snip-snip of his shears falling silent. Sarah, perched on the porch railing, felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. "You do good work," she called out, her voice a little breathy. "But maybe you missed a spot." He looked up, a puzzled frown creasing his tanned forehead. His eyes, the color of warm whiskey, met hers. The air, already thick with the heat of the day, seemed to thicken further. A playful grin, a practiced mask for her burgeoning confidence, touched her lips. I wasn't talking about the yard, she clarified softly, her gaze lingering on his face, tracing the lines etched by years of sun and hard work. A slow smile spread across his features, a ripple of understanding passing between them. He leaned the clippers against the trunk of a stately oak, wiping a stray bead of sweat from his temple with the back of his hand. Is that so? He rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly sound that sent a shiver down her spine. And where might the spot be, exactly? She pushed off the railing, descending the porch steps with a deliberate slowness. The setting sun cast long shadows, making the distance between them seem vast and exhilarating. Well, she began, her eyes dancing, it's more of a feeling, I suppose. She reached the edge of the manicured lawn, the scent of him, earth, sweat, and something uniquely masculine, filling her senses. A feeling that maybe, you're in need of a cold drink. His chuckle was a deep, chesty sound. A cold drink sounds like heaven right about now. Good, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she drew closer, the gap between them shrinking to mere feet. Because I just made a fresh pitcher of lemonade. The words hung in the air, a simple invitation laden with unspoken meaning. Her gaze met his again, holding, searching. The silence stretched, filled with the buzzing of cicadas and the rapid beat of her own heart. She felt a flush creeping up her neck, but she didn't look away. He didn't move, just watched her, his expression unreadable, yet undeniably intense. The lingering warmth of his gaze felt like a physical touch. He had finished his work, but the tension between them hummed like a taut wire. He finally broke the silence, his voice softer now. Lemonade, you say? A corner of his mouth twitched upwards. Lead the way, then, Sarah. She turned, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips, and led him towards the house. The lemonade, tart and sweet, was poured into 2 tall glasses, the ice clinking a delicate counterpoint to the thrumming energy that now filled the small kitchen. They sat at the worn wooden table, the late evening light painting the room in hues of orange and gold. He drank deeply, his eyes closed for a moment of pure relief. That's the best lemonade I've had all summer, he said, setting the glass down. I'm glad, she replied, her eyes fixed on his. She watched the way his throat moved as he swallowed, the way his fingers, strong and calloused, wrapped around the cool glass. The conversation drifted to the usual, the weather, the garden, but beneath the surface, an electric current pulsed. Their eyes kept meeting, lingering, a silent dialogue unfolding between them, promises and possibilities shimmering in the air. The lemonade was just an excuse, a sweet prelude to something more. A brush of hands. The sun, a molten disk melting into the western sky, stretched distorted shadows across the impeccable lawn. Cicadas now orchestrated the fading day, their drowsy hum replacing the earlier snip of shears. Michael, the landscaper, straightened with a sigh, the culmination of a long day's toil. His calloused hand brushed his brow, a path of sweat carving through the fine film of dust and grass clippings. The crisp aroma of freshly cut grass intertwined with the delicate sweetness of honeysuckle blooming by the porch. Sarah, a vibrant splash of youth in a sundress, leaned against the porch railing, a faint, knowing curve to her lips. Her eyes, the shade of a summer sky, sparkled with an unspoken dare. You've done beautiful work, Michael, she called, her voice a melodic ripple on the warm air. He turned, a tired but polite smile acknowledging her. But perhaps, she continued, pushing off the railing and descending a step, you overlooked something. Michael's brow furrowed, his gaze meticulously sweeping over the perfectly edged flower beds and precisely trimmed hedges. He prided himself on his exactitude. Overlooked something? He echoed, a genuine puzzle in his tone. Sarah's smile softened, her gaze holding his, a warmth radiating that made the summer air suddenly feel thick and heavy. I wasn't referring to the yard, she murmured, her voice a near whisper, yet carrying clearly across the diminishing space between them. The words hung, potent and unexpected. Michael's eyes, which had been scanning the landscape, snapped back to hers, widening almost imperceptibly. The playful flirtation was a vibrant current between them, undeniable. A flush crept up his neck, a surprising heat unrelated to the setting sun. He cleared his throat, suddenly finding the neatly trimmed rose bushes intensely absorbing. Well, I believe I've completed all I can for today, Sarah, he finally managed, his voice a little gruffer than intended. He reached for his tools, a practiced motion that now felt clumsy. Sarah chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Running away already, Michael, she teased, closing the remaining distance until she stood just a few feet from him, her scent, a blend of youth and something vaguely floral, reaching him. He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her youthful exuberance starkly contrasted with his own weary maturity. An audacious glint in her eyes, a confidence that both startled and intrigued him, held him captive. He found himself unable to tear his gaze away, caught in her magnetic pull. It's late, he offered, the words sounding woefully inadequate even to his own ears. He picked a stray clipping from his work pants, a nervous tick. Sarah stepped closer still, her hand reaching out, hovering, then retreating. Or maybe, she whispered, her voice barely audible, you just don't want to discover what else you might have missed. Her eyes flickered down to his hand, then back up to his. The air thrummed with unspoken possibilities. Michael felt an unfamiliar pull, a sense of being drawn into something he couldn't quite name, yet couldn't entirely resist. He swallowed hard, his heart now beating a rhythm decidedly not about exhaustion. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, bathing them in a soft, ethereal glow. The cricket's chorus swelled, a natural accompaniment to the rising tension. The festival invitation. The clippers whirred to a halt, the sudden silence amplifying the chirping of crickets. Elias, his back protesting slightly, ran a calloused hand across his forehead, wiping away a bead of sweat before it could sting his eye. The scent of freshly cut grass and damp earth hung heavy in the twilight. He straightened, admiring his handiwork along the winding flagstone path. Every rose bush meticulously trimmed, every errant weed vanquished. From the porch, Sarah's voice, light and teasing, drifted down to him. You do good work, Elias, but maybe you missed a spot. He looked up, a puzzled frown creasing his brow. His gaze swept over the pristine flower beds, the neatly edged lawn. Missed a spot, he repeated, genuinely confused. He prided himself on his thoroughness. Sarah pushed off the railing, her sundress swaying gently as she descended the porch steps. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, met his, and a soft, knowing smile played on her lips. I wasn't talking about the yard, she murmured, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she drew closer. The summer air, already thick with the scent of honeysuckle, suddenly felt heavier, charged with an unexpected current. Elias's heart gave a strange thump against his ribs. He felt the familiar warmth creep up his neck, a blush he thought he'd long outgrown. He cleared his throat, searching for a neutral response, but his mind felt uncharacteristically blank. Before he could stammer out an answer, a flash of vibrant red caught his eye. A small, ornate envelope, sealed with a wax impression of a blooming rose, lay nestled among the freshly turned soil at the base of a particularly fragrant jasmine vine. It certainly hadn't been there when he'd started. What's that? He asked, grateful for the distraction, though a part of him still felt tethered to Sarah's intense gaze. Sarah's eyes followed his, and she bent down, retrieving the envelope with a graceful movement. Her fingers brushed the intricate wax seal. Looks like an invitation. She turned it over, revealing no recipient's name, just the elegant cursive script, to the heart and the hand that tends the garden. For you, I think, she said, her voice laced with a new kind of curiosity. She handed it to him. Elias's rough thumb traced the raised rose. He carefully broke the seal, pulling out a single, thick card. The paper felt cool and smooth against his skin. He read the looping script aloud, his voice low. You are cordially invited to the Midsummer Bloom Festival, a celebration of growth and new beginnings, held beneath the whispering willow on the longest night. Festivities commence at dusk. Dress in your finest floral attire. A special unveiling awaits. He finished, looking from the card to Sarah, a bewildered expression on his face. Midsummer Bloom Festival? I've never heard of it. Sarah leaned in, her scent, a mix of sunscreen and something sweet, enveloping him. Neither have I. But it sounds intriguing. And unveiling? What do you think that means? Her eyes sparkled with a blend of excitement and mischief, a silent invitation to unravel the mystery together. The unexpected invitation had shifted the atmosphere, but the lingering spark between them remained, humming just beneath the surface. Under festival lights. The scent of roasted almonds and something like spun sugar mingled with the faint, metallic tang of the distant river, a symphony of aromas that pulled Sarah further into the bustling square. Strings of amber and ruby lanterns crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm, flickering glow on the throngs of people. Laughter and the rhythmic thrum of a drum circle emanated from a makeshift stage, painting the air with a vibrant, uninhibited energy. She clutched her small, beaded purse, the unfamiliar weight a comforting anchor in the swirling chaos. It had been an impulsive decision, this festival, a way to chase away the lingering, awkward silence that had settled between her and the landscaper after her ill-advised comment. He hadn't been back since. A wave of both regret and defiant exhilaration washed over her. Lost, little bird, a voice rumbled beside her, deep and resonant. Sarah turned, her heart doing a quick, startled leap. A man, impossibly tall with shoulders that seemed to block out the very festival lights, stood beside her. His dark eyes, framed by laugh lines, crinkled at the corners as he offered a charming, slightly crooked smile. He wasn't old, not like him, but he carried an air of seasoned experience, a comfortable confidence. Just, taking it all in, she managed, feeling a blush creep up her neck. "First time at the midsummer revel?" he asked, his gaze lingering on her face. She nodded, suddenly aware of the way the light caught the delicate embroidery on her dress. "How did you know?" He chuckled, a rich, low sound. "The wide eyes, the way you keep glancing up at the lanterns. It's a tell. I'm Elias, by the way." He extended a large, calloused hand. "Sarah." Her hand felt small and delicate in his. A spark, unexpected and pleasant, seemed to jump between them. Elias gestured towards a nearby stall, where candied fruits gleamed under a single bright lamp. "Care for something sweet?" "My treat, for a fellow reveler." Hesitantly, Sarah agreed. As they walked, the crowd seemed to part for Elias, his presence commanding a subtle respect. He spoke of the festival's history, of the ancient traditions it celebrated, his voice a balm against the cacophony. He had an easy charm, making her laugh with stories of past revels, and for the first time in days, the image of the landscaper, his puzzled, then knowing, expression, faded. They found a quiet bench near the river's edge, the drone of the festival a distant hum. The candied apple Elias bought her was sticky and sweet, a delicious mess. As the conversation flowed, easy and unforced, Sarah found herself confiding in him, a stranger, about her recent confusion, the sudden, unsettling shift in her world. She didn't mention the landscaper directly, but spoke of a moment of impulsive flirtation that had thrown everything off kilter. Elias listened intently, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, a comfortable silence settled. Then he said, his voice soft, "Sometimes, little bird, the most unexpected sparks fly. It's what you do with them that truly matters." He reached across, gently wiping a smudge of candied apple from her cheek. His touch was light, but the subtle intimacy of it sent a shiver down her spine, different from the heavy, charged air she'd felt on the porch. This was an invitation, not a challenge. A sky full of stars. The last snip of the hedge clippers vibrated through Elias's hand, a familiar hum that always signaled the end of a long day. He wiped a forearm across his brow, the salt stinging his eyes for a moment as he surveyed his work. The azaleas were perfectly sculpted, the hydrangeas a burst of controlled color along the winding stone path. A job well done, as always. He straightened, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back, and turned to gather his tools. "You do good work, but maybe you missed a spot." Sarah's voice, a melodic current in the warm summer air, made him pause. He looked up, a puzzled frown creasing his forehead. She was leaning against the porch railing, a vision in a light sundress, her hair catching the late afternoon sun like spun gold. 18. Just 18, a fact that had settled heavily in his mind this morning. Missed a spot, he repeated, scanning the manicured lawn, the precisely edged flower beds. Where? A playful grin, a flash of white teeth, transformed her face. I wasn't talking about the yard. Her voice softened, dropping to a near whisper, yet it cut through the drone of cicadas, through the quiet whirring of his own thoughts. The summer air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming roses, suddenly felt heavier, pressing in around them. The space between them, normally just a stretch of manicured lawn, now thrummed with an unexpected, undeniable tension. Elias felt a jolt, a sudden awareness that had nothing to do with the setting sun or the weight of his tools. He saw her not as the child he'd watched grow up, but as a young woman, vibrant and bold, her eyes holding a glint he hadn't noticed before. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. Sarah, he fumbled for words, for an appropriate response, but his mind was a sudden blank. She pushed off the railing, moving with an easy grace that pulled his gaze. It's getting dark, she said, her voice lighter now, but still holding that knowing edge. You should stay for dinner. Mom's making her famous lasagna. He hesitated. Dinner. A simple offer, a neighborly gesture, yet it felt loaded, imbued with a new layer of meaning after her earlier words. He looked at the sky, a canvas of deep blues and purples beginning to pepper with early stars. I appreciate the offer, Sarah, but I should get home. Nonsense, she countered, already descending the steps. You work hard. You deserve a good meal. Besides, she added, reaching his side, her arm lightly brushing his as she gestured towards his pile of tools, you'll need an extra hand with all that. Before he could protest further, she was already gathering the smaller hand tools, her movements efficient. He found himself watching her, a strange mix of discomfort and a curious pull warring within him. The air grew cooler as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first true stars began to emerge, sharp points of light against the deepening velvet. As they worked side by side, the casual brush of her arm against his, the fleeting touch of her fingers as they both reached for a rake, sent a subtle tremor through him. He was acutely aware of her presence, of the soft scent of her perfume, of the easy rhythm of her breathing beside him. The sky above them, now a breathtaking expanse of glittering constellations, seemed to mock the sudden complexity of the ground beneath their feet. Whispers in the wind. The scent of freshly cut grass, sharp and green, mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of honeysuckle clinging to the porch trellis. Sarah, her brow furrowed in concentration, traced the intricate patterns in the wrought iron railing with a finger. The landscaper, Mr. Henderson, a man whose hands bore the permanent calluses of a life spent in earth, wiped his brow again with the back of a gloved hand, his gaze lingering on her. The playful spark in her eyes had been quickly replaced by something more introspective, a quiet intensity that made the sudden silence feel charged. A missed spot, you said? Mr. Henderson's voice was a low rumble, a stark contrast to the earlier whirring of the clippers. He'd dropped the tool on the pristine lawn, the plastic housing glinting in the late afternoon sun. He took a hesitant step toward the porch, then another, the gravel crunching softly under his work boots. What kind of spot were you thinking of? Sarah's gaze drifted from the railing to the distant horizon, where the sky was beginning to blush with the promise of sunset. The kind that's not visible with the naked eye, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the gentle stir of the breeze. She turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. The kind that hides deeper. A mischievous glint returned to her eyes. Or maybe I'm just feeling poetic today. A laugh, gruff but genuine, escaped Mr. Henderson. Poetic, eh? I didn't take you for the poetic type, Sarah. He leaned against a nearby column, his posture relaxed, yet his eyes remained fixed on her. The casual stance belied a subtle tension in his shoulders. What's on your mind? The wind, as if on cue, picked up, rustling the leaves in the ancient oak tree by the driveway. It carried with it the distant chime of an ice cream truck and the scent of damp earth. Sarah shivered, though the air was warm. Just thoughts. About things changing. About whispers in the wind. She pushed off the railing, moving with an uncharacteristic slowness, descending the steps until she stood on the path before him. Her proximity made the air crackle. "Changes happen," he said, his voice softer now, almost comforting. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before gently cupping her chin. His thumb brushed lightly against her jawline. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a jolt through her. "What kind of whispers?" Sarah met his gaze, a vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there moments before. The playful banter had dissolved, leaving behind something raw and exposed. "The kind that tell you to pay attention," she whispered, her voice husky. "The kind that tell you, some things are worth exploring." Her eyes flickered downwards, then back up to his, a silent question hanging between them. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in hues of gold and rose. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken possibilities. Sarah's courage. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint sweetness of honeysuckle, but Sarah barely registered it. Her gaze was fixed on Mr. Henderson, his weathered hand still holding the clippers, his brow furrowed in a way that tightened the knot in her stomach. The playful grin she'd started with felt fragile now, the words she'd chosen hanging in the humid air like a challenge. "Missed a spot," he finally repeated, his voice raspy, a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet afternoon. He slowly straightened, his eyes, usually kind and crinkled at the corners, now held a bewildered intensity. The shift in his posture, the slight tightening of his jaw, made her realize the full weight of her implication. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence. I wasn't talking about the yard," she managed again, her voice a whisper, barely audible over the chirping cicadas. She pushed off the railing, taking a hesitant step towards him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The space between them, once casual and familiar, now felt charged, electric. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to blame it on a bad joke, but something deeper, a resolve she hadn't known she possessed, held her ground. He took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling beneath his faded work shirt. "What were you talking about, Sarah?" The directness of his question, devoid of anger but heavy with expectation, was more intimidating than any outburst. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. About the way you look at me sometimes," she blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "And the way it makes me feel." Her cheeks burned, but she met his gaze, refusing to look away. The truth, raw and unvarnished, hung between them. It was a gamble, a leap into an unknown abyss, but the alternative, silence, pretense, felt like a betrayal of herself. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, surprise, perhaps a flash of guilt, then a deep weariness. He lowered the clippers, the metal clinking softly as they touched the flagstones. "Sarah," he began, his voice softer now, almost a plea. "You're a beautiful young woman, you've grown into someone remarkable." He paused, searching for the right words. "But there are lines, boundaries, that need to be respected." His eyes, though still intense, held a hint of sadness now. "I know," she interrupted, her voice gaining a surprising strength. "And I'm not asking you to cross them. I needed you to know I see it. I feel it too." Her confession was a release, a fragile bridge built across the unspoken. The afternoon sun, once a gentle warmth, now felt like a spotlight, illuminating the raw vulnerability of the moment. She watched him, waiting, the world narrowed to the beat of her own heart and the guarded expression on his face. The ball was in his court now, and the tension stretched, taut and vibrating, between them. A clear path forward. The air, thick with the scent of mown grass and a faint, sweet whisper of honeysuckle, pressed in around Mark. He lowered his clippers, their motor sighing into silence, and used a calloused hand to wipe a bead of sweat from his temple. Across the yard, Sarah still leaned against the porch railing, a knowing glint in her eyes that seemed to electrify the humid atmosphere. "Missed a spot, huh?" she quipped, a slow smile spreading across his face as their gazes locked. He pushed back his hat, the brim shadowing eyes that held an unexpected depth. "And where might that be, young lady?" Sarah pushed off the railing, a loose tendril of dark hair falling across her cheek. She didn't move toward him, yet the subtle tilt of her head, the easy stance, extended a clear invitation. "Right here," she murmured, tapping her chest lightly, directly over her heart. Her voice, a husky whisper, seemed to absorb the cicada's drone. "It's been feeling incomplete. Like it needs a professional touch to truly flourish." A jolt ran through Mark, not of surprise, but of a long-dormant recognition. He'd seen that particular look before, years ago, in eyes now a faded memory. But this was different. This was Sarah, vibrant and uninhibited, poised on the precipice of something new. He leaned against his clippers, a thoughtful expression settling on his features. "A professional touch, you say?" he mused, his voice rougher than usual. "That's a significant undertaking, Sarah. Cultivating hearts isn't quite the same as trimming hedges." "I'm not asking for a trim," she countered, stepping onto the stone path, her gaze unwavering. "I'm asking for a complete transformation. Something exquisite. And I believe you're the only one who can do it." She took another step, then another, until she stood mere feet from him, the space between them thrumming with an unspoken energy. He studied her, the genuine earnestness in her eyes, a youthful intensity that belied her years. It wasn't simply flirtation, it was a raw, open declaration. A warmth, unrelated to the summer sun, began to spread through him. "You're 18, Sarah," he said, his voice a quiet caution, testing the uncharted waters. "And you're 58, she retorted without missing a beat, a defiant spark in her eyes. "Age is merely a number, Mark. You taught me that yourself, remember? When you said a tree's value isn't in its youth, but in its roots and the stories it has weathered." She reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his forearm, a touch that sent a shiver through him. "I want to weather some stories with you." The air thickened further, the honeysuckle growing richer, almost intoxicating. Mark looked down at her hand, then back into her expectant eyes. This was no game. This was a clear path, unexpectedly exhilarating, laid out before him. He took a deep breath, the decision forming, firm and undeniable. The landscape of his life, barren for so long, suddenly held the promise of vibrant growth. "All right, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble, "let's get to work."